All right. Good afternoon, everybody. We are going live with HR Florida. My name is Georgette Cartagena, and I am going to put a quick question in the chat as people start to join us. So welcome. If you are watching right now, feel free to share with us where you are joining from and what apps do you use when you first wake up and before you go to bed. Because we know we are all attached to our phones these days. So before we get started with the program, my name is Georgia Cartagena. I'm the Emerging Professionals Director for HR Florida, and we kickstarted Inside HR as a series last year to open the door for career development conversations for emerging professionals, and have since evolved into how do we support the HR professional of today and the future. And so I'm really excited to be bringing forth Melissa Severance to host a conversation around digital wellness. I see Sarasota, Florida has joined us. Oh, the Calm app and Outlook. Yes, those are very popular apps for HR professionals. Me personally, I'm a big fan of Threads. I have dived in and just gotten sucked into that world. So as soon as I wake up and before I go to bed, that's the app I'm looking at, which may or may not be a problem. I'm going to welcome Melissa Severance to the stage here.
Hi, everyone. I am so excited to be here and talk about this, impactful topic that we're all kind of dealing with day in and day out, digital wellness. I hope I know a lot of you on the stream, but if I don't, I work for Inspire Big Dreams, and I'm an executive coach, corporate trainer, and HR consultant. I'm definitely a big person that's into mindfulness and digital wellness. So that's why I wanted to do this stream for HR Florida today and bring this knowledge as their well-being director. This is something that, I just stepped into this year, and I'm looking to bring different knowledge on the wellness side to all the chapters within Florida and all the leaders in the workplaces for our members. So what I'm trying to do is each quarter bring in different knowledge and expertise on wellness. And today I wanted to introduce digital wellness a little bit more and let you know that I'm here to support you, your chapters, and also the workforces that are here in Florida and throughout the United States. And I'm very lucky today to have a special guest. I have Nina. She's going to be with us today. Nina Hersher. She is the co-founder of the Digital Wellness Institute, founder of the Digital Wellness Reliance Lab. I went through her program back in 2001 or 2021, sorry, not that long ago. But it was one of the first cohorts, and it was a time when I was really trying to do more with mindfulness practice within my life. And then I found this, and I thought this was a perfect next step for me to get more education on my wellness journey. So Nina, I'd love to introduce you or have you introduce yourself a little bit more and tell everyone about your journey and how we got here.
Thank you so much for having me today, Melissa. It's a pleasure to be here. I have been working in digital wellness for a while, and I'm happy to share a little bit about my journey as it relates to HR and humans and connection. So growing up, I had a very hard time talking. I would get blocked on certain words, and I would use eye contact to let people know I was trying to communicate with them when I would get blocked on words. And as I grew into a teenager, I realized sometimes people wouldn't even know I was trying to talk to them because they were looking at their phones. Mm-hmm. And I saw this kind of foundational, fundamental shift in how we were connecting and operating as human beings, what presence even meant, and became really intrigued in that as it related to my personal journey. So I actually grew up on the East Coast, and I majored in sociology, and then I went to grad school for social work. I thought I'd be a traditional counselor. And halfway through my program, we were doing a clinic at the WashU Health Center that looked at undergraduate academic achievement in the context of self-care and technology usage. And I realized there was something there. And this was 10 years ago. This was pre-COVID. And I really wanted to make sure that this topic grew and was seen and recognized. And so right out of grad school, I founded the Digital Wellness Collective, which evolved into the Digital Wellness Institute. And I now also run the Digital Resilience Lab, which really focuses on providing education to wellness and healthcare practitioners about what the overuse of tech means. But that being said, our conversation today is going to be a very healthy tech, not anti-tech, because we don't want to shame anyone. We're literally using tech as a tool right now to connect with each other. And that is such a beautiful thing. And so we'll be talking about digital flourishing, actionable tips, and meeting people where they are so we can use technology for its highest purpose and its highest good.
Yeah, and I think when I first went through the program, 4 years ago, I was thinking of more of how are we going to stop using text? But we're really not there yet, right? We want to flourish, and I think for everybody on the call, why is digital wellness different than wellness in general or mental health, or how does it all relate together? I think that's a kind of a good thing before we kind of jump into how we flourish with it.
Yeah. So I guess rewinding a step, when we're talking about digital wellness, we're talking about what is that like optimum place of health and well-being that we can each achieve using technology. And so that's very broad, right? I think we're going to be entering a time, Melissa, when we won't need to say digital and it will just be wellness. But for now, we get to have that aha moment with people and say, yes, this is its own category. Mm-hmm. But digital flourishing or digital wellness, kind of as that umbrella, there are all of these subcategories beneath it. So things like environment, productivity, tech-enabled health, mental health, communication. And this is a very holistic model, right? And so whether you work as HR or in wellness more broadly, I think most of us have a few presenting problems in mind, but there's also honestly a bit of detective work that has to go on. And I think you're going to be showing a kind of image of that wheel. But let's say someone comes to us in HR and says, my primary issue is productivity. We will address that. But we also want to look at things like their built in digital environments. Are there a lot of distractions? Is there a reason that they're not being as productive, that they're not achieving the focus and flow? Are we communicating if we're working from home to say, please don't knock my door unless the house is literally on fire? And all of these other little pieces that really go into wellness in a wired world.
Yeah, and I think we're looking to thrive, right, with technology. And I think, unfortunately, technology is one of the pieces that burnout is happening across all the United States, all across the world, right? I think it's high percentages that people are just burnt out now.
Yeah, I think the latest research was that 80% of global workers have experienced information overload. And in the US, 54.2% experience techno stress.
Wow. Yeah, and that's why the digital flourishing comes into play, right? Because we need to make sure that we are doing everything we can to make sure we're not in that category of being burned out from it, and we're using it in a way that we thrive.
Absolutely.
So tell me a little bit about the flourishing, the wheel that's here right now. And I know there's a lot of different components to it that you bring into play to make sure we're digitally well.
Absolutely. So digital flourishing is kind of the unique approach of the Digital Wellness Institute. And the reason I bring that up is because we have an incredible research director. Her name is Dr. Sophie Janik-Bowles, and she is a positive media psychologist, which is a really cool new field if you haven't heard of it. Again, very healthy tech, not anti-tech. And so this wheel was developed with research in mind. And Sophie has led the validation of these categories and published 2 different peer-reviewed versions of the Digital Flourishing Survey, which is really exciting because there wasn't any tool that people could use to say, hey, how am I doing online? And if I don't score really high in one category, what are some things I can do about it? And so if you go to digitalflourishing.com, you can actually take that survey for free and get your kind of free digital wellness checkup. But that is, in essence, the digital flourishing wheel. And it's meant to help people kind of untangle that web and deconstruct what areas they really might want to work on and what areas they might actually already be doing very well in. All of that being said, digital flourishing is very individualized. So just like we would talk to anybody in kind of a coaching or counseling appointment, I think it's really important to name and recognize that we're all wired differently. We're all born differently. And so for someone who maybe is a Gen Zer, receiving 20 text messages in a row might not be overwhelming to them. But for someone who's a bit older, that type of fragmented communication might actually result in digital overwhelm. And so this is not a one one-size-fits-all approach, but there are practices that are generally good to do kind of across generations, industries, and age groups.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, and I think we need to focus on digital wellness now more than ever. It's definitely coming in strong and it's not going away. And we want to use our technology in an effective, productive way that is going to help us flourish. What are you seeing that's important for organizations to kind of focus on to make sure that they're being digitally well?
That's such a good question. So two of the biggest categories I see that actually impact culture change have to do with movement and breaks and eating habits. And those might not be the most obvious ones, right? But the research is actually showing that people who are eating in front of their computers are having a lot of digestive issues. Our bodies aren't getting a chance to shift into that parasympathetic rest and digest, and we're just on. And so it might seem like we're being more productive by eating over lunch, but that's not always the case. And it's leading to kind of this downstream of consequences. And so for leaders, I think there is such a power in modeling the behavior because we do live in a permission-based culture, and that's just very real. And so if a leader has to have a meeting over lunch, maybe encouraging people to turn off their cameras so we don't have that mirror anxiety of chewing on camera. And by the same token, looking at our communication norms. And so there's incredible research that came out on something called email apnea, which shows that when people are checking their messages, especially for urgent things, they might actually be holding their breath. And as you say that, right, it seems obvious, but in reality, so many of us are checking our phone within the first 10 minutes of waking up. And so if you are feeling empowered, energized to work late, to send an email at midnight, maybe don't and plan that email to go out for the next morning. Because I know that if I received an email super late from my CEO, I might think, hey, is this urgent? Should I respond? And then we kind of get into this loop of people feeling like they have to be on call for each other when nobody really wants to be on call after work, especially when the lines between work as a place of kind of production and home as a place of retreat are so blurred.
Yeah, totally. And you know, this always on culture, you know, there's a lot of stats that are, you know, unbelievable, how much we're on our tech. And for us to refocus when we go to our tech, it could go from 70 seconds to 23 minutes. That's a long time to refocus and get back into our deep work or the work we want to get in. We pick up our phone 58 times per day. That's 3 hours and 15 minutes. That's a lot of time just picking up and looking at our phone and maybe not doing anything productive. 15% of our work week is opening emails and recovering to get back into focus. You know, we look at emails and don't respond to them. We need to do that, you know, rule that, you know, 2-minute rule that let's get it done. But instead we go back and forth and our focus is gone. And we are the ones that interrupt ourselves. 50% of the time, we're the ones that are causing these interruptions, not even anything else, not even the notifications or anything along those lines. And I'm sure you have tons more stats, but these are some that I had from, you know, my journey that I collected that I thought were impactful.
Yes, these are hugely impactful. And I think the one about the 23 minutes, that is the average time it takes for someone to regain focus and flow after being interrupted. And so the reality is that only about 2.5% of people are super taskers. And so a lot of people think that we can multitask, and that's not actually the case. And so, Melissa, what you touched on that really hit home for me was that so much of this work is about impulse control. And that's not always something that we want to hear, but because that is the case, ways that we can do challenges together, we can, again, talk about that permission-based culture, we can make changes where we don't feel so alone, will make this work easier. I think when I talk about digital wellness, there are kind of these two different elements. One being, what is the onus on the tech companies to develop products that aren't necessarily as addictive? But also, how can we choose and change our own behavior regardless of the products that are out there? And I'm right now, for example, wearing an Aura ring. And this is such an interesting example for me because I periodically break up with my Aura ring. I don't want to check my phone first thing, but I wonder, how did I sleep last night? Did I get an A plus? And I just want to know, because we're human beings. But the average US household now has 22 connected devices. And so beyond Aura rings, we're talking about saunas, washer dryers, heaters that you can turn on from the airport if you're not home. And so I think what that really brings up is that the infrastructure of our environment, our physical and digital environments, are designed to keep us on the tech.
Yeah. And there's such a big digital impact. And I think a lot of us are not taking breaks from the digital world that we live in. So I want to ask the audience, when is the last time you took a digital break, and what was it? Put it in the chat, because we want to really, dive into that. But is there any nuggets to share, Nina, about the impact that digital is having? I think we covered a lot of it. Is there any other points that you want to bring home?
Yeah, well, I'm really looking forward to seeing people's answers to this question. And as we think about what constitutes a true digital break, right? I think one of the questions that I ask people is, if you had kind of this inner battery or inner pilot light, if you're old enough to know what pilot lights are, what activities make that flame burn even brighter and what activities blow it out? And this is a really good gauge of, when we take a break, is that break effectively recharging us? Or are we just checking Instagram and feeling maybe even more tired after that break from the negative kind of online social comparison?
Yeah. And I know for me, what I try to do when I wake up is I go get my cup of coffee and go out in my lanai. Luckily, I live in sunny Florida and I can do that, and it's beautiful all the time. Then I'm trying not to pick up my phone and go right to it. And I think we have some other things in the chat that just came in, possibly. Do you want to share some of that, Georgette? I think you're muted right now, though.
I'm seeing that one person took a cruise and didn't purchase the Wi-Fi for 8 days. That's amazing. I just was on a 6-hour flight and I thought to myself, what if I didn't purchase the Wi-Fi and I just read my book? And I'm so glad that I read my trashy novel, because that actually relaxed me. And these are the things that we need to embrace, right? We need to be honest about what is actually going to recharge us. And with the retreat I just held outside of Boston also, what we found was, when there is service, people have a harder time doing a digital detox. So that comes right back again to the impulse control. But when the environment supports unplugging, when there's communication charter work, which we can talk more about in just a few minutes, I think we embrace this clear is kind mentality. And if you've never heard of clear is kind, write it down, circle it, highlight it. Because in essence, clear is kind is about, there is less anxiety when we have clarity and when we are grounded in our truth. And so let's say that Andrea, who did an amazing job of not purchasing the Wi-Fi for 8 days, sent a message to all of her loved ones prior and said, hey, I'm going on this cruise. Don't worry, I didn't fall off a cliff. I'm fine. I'll get back to you when I'm home. That's a great example of a communication charter and taking an action that acknowledges our permission-based culture and gives both Andrea's loved ones and her the peace of mind to actually effectively be able to unplug and power down and recharge her system on vacation.
Awesome.
Love it. And one more comment that I wanted to highlight, especially because Nina, you had talked about sort of resetting, is that Chris mentioned that he reads for 45 minutes after breakfast. So kind of like a daily habit that he's incorporated to give him that time.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And email apnea is especially prevalent in the morning. And so when we check our phones first thing, and we may inadvertently be going into fight or flight by looking for urgent messages, that's definitely not going to set a good tone for our nervous system when it's just the start of the day. So whatever grounding ritual you have, if that's reading, if that's 5 minutes unplugged, right? We're into the and, not the or. Do what you can, and then we can always kind of change that, improve that, increase that. But beginning something now, even tomorrow, even tonight, having an unplugged kind of wind down routine can be so impactful.
Yeah. And Dee Dee had a good comment about reading an actual book instead of reading something on your phone and on a screen. We should definitely be doing that. Getting back to some of the basics, having those live conversations. We definitely need to have that happening.
Yes.
So I think we need to check in on our tech. Ask some questions, ask some impactful questions. Am I using this tool or is it using me? Sometimes I feel like we're starting to get obsessed, unfortunately, or addicted to doing certain things on certain devices or certain apps. And we go there without even knowing we're on there. We're just scrolling and getting nowhere. And seeing if what we're doing with tech is making you feel connected, productive, or drained. Sometimes I feel like I'm on my laptop all the time. I have to, shut it down, and call somebody on the phone, which I know a lot of people don't love to pick up the phone anymore. They want me to text them, but unfortunately, Melissa calls you sometimes.
I love to be called. Call me anytime.
All right. Perfect. Yeah. And, these questions are probably really important for a lot of people because we're not thinking about it. We're just going through our daily lives and, being on that hamster wheel, I kind of call it, and they say it's kind of insanity, but we do a lot of things that are insanity each and every day. And so we definitely need to check in. Is there any other questions that, you think kind of helps us think about our tech use that we should possibly highlight, Nina?
I think these questions are really beautifully framed.
Yeah.
And I guess what I would highlight here is the why. So why do we feel that we have to be on call? And one of the things that you've probably heard about in the news is that the attention economy is really, really present now. And so basically what that is it's just that your attention, including your attention now, is one of the most precious things out there. And companies try to capture your attention and keep it for as long as possible. And in that way, your attention can kind of be bought. And so even free tools like Instagram, for example, they have ads. And so is it really free? Is free really free? And so just noticing what that feels like for you. And an example of the attention economy and how the algorithms are designed to keep and hook your attention by giving you variable rewards is that if you ever post something on Instagram, nobody likes it, maybe you're having that self-doubt of, should I take the post down? And then you check back for the fourth time and there's a burst of 20 likes. Well, the reality is that not everybody liked your post at the exact same moment. It's that the feed and the platform released it because they want you to come back. They want you to check. They want to keep your attention on the platform. And so with this question that Melissa posed, am I using the tool or is the tool using me? That's a great check-in. So whenever you go to check your tech, especially for leisure, we want to acknowledge that your phone is not just a phone. Your phone is now a computer and it can do so many things. And so even if you go in with a singular focus, such as answering one email, you might get a pop-up from Amazon saying, hey, do you want to reorder soap? Or something comes up, right? And so we want to engage with tech with that purpose so that we don't lose time and then wonder, hey, what happened the last 3 hours? And especially for folks on this call who have kids, I think when you're thinking about screen time, it's important to acknowledge that the purpose of the tech is kind of fluid, especially when we're just in the habit of checking it without something in mind. And then our resulting feelings from the tech are something to always examine, to say, hey, is it using me or did I actually use this for a purpose that was achieved?
Yeah, definitely. And I think it comes down to intentional use. I love the word intentional use of our technology. And I think that's the only way we truly become resilient. How does the overuse kind of affect our mental health, relationships, and productivity? We talked about some of it, but there's some other things I think we could highlight in this area. That's really, when we are intentional, we won't have happen.
Yeah. So in the mental health category specifically, overuse, looking at the outcomes, is going to affect things in ways perhaps like insomnia, brain fog, anxiety. If we're talking more about the productivity end of things, we can think about not being in focus and flow. So those interruptions, the distractions that kind of seem to compound themselves, that can drastically reduce our output and how effective we are. Because if we are underslept from the tech, And then we think, oh, we'll just wake up and drink some extra coffee. That's not necessarily the case, because we're not going to be showing up as our highest self. We're going to be exhausted. And so that's going to show up in our work product, in our interactions, and in our communications. And if you think about kind of two different archetypes of colleagues, right? So one archetype of a colleague shows up and they have the agenda and they're ready, their coffee is already in hand, and the other one needs 10 minutes just to drop in and they're exhausted, right? We know which colleague we would rather interact with that day.
Mm-hmm.
And so as much as this is a challenge, I think it's also an opportunity to really look at and have ownership of how we can show up as change agents towards a culture of digital flourishing, but also just a positive online digital culture, as almost all of us now, regardless of if you're in office or working from home, are going to be having virtual meetings and virtual interactions.
I love it. Now, I think for me, how is it really being intentional? How are people being intentional? I know, like, you can put your phone down, put your phone on silent, or mute notifications. I do my best to do some of that, or at least hide my phone when it's in my bag. So I'm not like looking at it every 5 minutes when I want to be present with people. But what else can we do to be really intentional with our tech?
So the phrase that I love is bringing intention to our attention. And that's what we're doing right now too, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually positioned myself to show you guys something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you'll see in this corner of my house, we have this kind of unplugged area, and it has all the chargers you can think of, the charger for the iPad and the Kindle and the computer. Mm-hmm. And so thinking about environmental psychology, right? Our environment can, with the right conditions, create either behavioral friction to change a habit, or we can remove that friction. And so this is an interesting example because we put it there for kind of collective household transparency and accountability. So by 9:30 p.m. every night, all of our devices are plugged in this area, and we recharge ourselves just like we recharge our phones. And this is also something that I'm teaching my child. Mm-hmm. And so having a cue like that can be really nice. And it can also make other people feel like they're not under attack. And so if you're all doing it together, it just becomes that much easier. And then it's also not right next to your bed. For people who are caregiving, for people who need to keep their phones on them, I would suggest maybe just not putting your phone next to your bed, so that you create that positive behavioral friction. So you don't reach for it first thing. You have to at least go across the room. Maybe your book is next to your bed, or that glass of lemon water, but not the phone. And going back to something like a alarm clock or a sunrise alarm clock, which wakes more gently with the circadian rhythms that naturally occur with the light outside, it isn't as jarring. And you're just going to enter each day in an entirely new way.
I love it. Well, you in the audience, anybody who's streaming live with us, what are ways that you're intentionally using tech to support your well-being or growth? Love to hear some comments so we can share to the group. But what I think, some things that we have a really hard time to do is make boundaries around technology. I know we try to put our phone across the room, but sometimes we're not doing that. We're not putting our phone on silent. We're keeping it right where we can see it. When we want to make those connections and with our people we love, even, we're still not doing it. I know sometimes you can see everybody at the dinner table on their phone. So let me know how you guys are, being intentional with your techs or putting that boundaries around your tech. And Nina, what are some other strategies for boundaries on the tech side?
So I think the unplug box or charging area is really fun, especially with kids. You can turn it into like an arts and crafts activity and say, like, we want to make the head of a shark and put all of our devices in the head of the shark every day. But for more just like general, depending if it's just you or a larger group of people in your household, I think those communication charters or family charters can be very powerful, so long as it's framed as a conversation and an invitation and not a punishment. And if you choose to do that, if you choose to say, hey, what are our core values as a family? What's important to us? How is our behavior reflecting those, or maybe misaligned? It becomes this beautiful flow and this beautiful dialogue where kids especially have a lot to say about, hey, mom, sometimes I'm trying to talk to you and you're looking at your phone. Can you put your phone away during dinner time too? And there is this kind of ownership that shows up by all parties. But again, the clear is kind. And I see Andrea showing no phones at dinner. That's such a great example. So that aligns with your values of presence. If you're talking about something, if you want to research something, look it up. Maybe you do that right after dinner. I remember that when I met my husband's family for the first time, they had a laptop that sat at the kitchen table. And they're all coders and engineers, but I actually had a really hard time with that. And so I asked if we could at least close it when we were having dinner. But again, everyone has a different dynamic. And so that was something I had to learn. We're pretty good about putting our phones on do not disturb. Our family likes to joke that we don't just go into D&D, we go into submarine mode where you can reach us for like several days. But that aligns with who we are and what we do. And to us, it's very important that when we're showing up with our full attention and our full presence. And I would rather have a long phone call or an in-person visit with someone than have like a fragmented conversation over text over the course of a couple of days. And so that's just kind of a little bit about me. But everyone has to, I think, pause and reflect on what is important to them, not what other people feel they should do or what should be important to them, but what's actually important to them. And I think also there are certain times of year where it seems to be easier for some reason in this permission-based culture to really enact habit change. And that tends to be around the new year. That's like the really like one where people feel like they can turn and say, hey, I want you to know that I'm trying this new thing. And people go, oh yeah, good for you. It's a new year, new you. Other times, sometimes are like people's birthdays, around the holidays, Thanksgiving. There's also Digital Wellness Day, which we created, which runs the first Friday in every May. But you can create your own Digital Wellness Day at literally any time of the year within your company. You can share some of these tips that Melissa's also distributing today. I think there are a lot of opportunities, but in the fast-paced world, it is going to be up to each of us to create that pause because it's not going to happen on its own.
Yeah, totally. I totally agree. And I think we got to figure out how to get focused, right? Go into that deep work. I kind of see it as doing the technique of focused sprints, where you're kind of taking time out and just focusing on one area, and not trying to focus all day on something or be tech free, maybe the whole day, but for a certain period of time when you have a project that's critical or you want to really connect and have them deep conversations. I'm a person that loves one-on-one conversations in person. So when I do have that time, I want to make sure that I'm not letting my tech come into it and really intrude and make me not be able to really connect with that person. Are you have any, ways that you try to focus more on the digital side or more just in general, or see people maybe using this strategy for deep work?
Absolutely. So I think for people who are new to the concept of deep work, it's basically just protected time that's just for you. There's a great book I love by Nir Eyal. It's called Indistractable. And two of the key takeaways from that book are, one, to time block your calendar. So just as you would treat an appointment with your boss, put on the calendar when you're taking your lunch break, especially if you have the type of calendar, a calendar link where people can automatically add meetings to your calendar, block the time that you need for you. And that also includes waking up. And so if you want to put on your calendar, walk the dog around the block, whatever you need to do, but treat that as it's real. If it's on my calendar, it's real. It's happening. And the other thing is to really look at the ways that we get distracted and then figure out how we can eliminate those distractions. And so my husband was having a lot of challenges with work the past week. I think he would be comfortable with me sharing. And it's because we're wrapping up an addition on our house and he was being constantly interrupted by contractors. And I said, honey, go to the co-working space. Like I could just see it. I could see it. He went to the co-working space. So sometimes if there's something predictable going on in your house, consider going to a coffee shop. Consider going to the office, but get yourself outside because that can help with both focus and creativity and the motivation and passion to do our work. And then the other thing when we're talking about focusing and productivity is to look at kind of your natural rhythm. So are you someone who's really productive in the morning or the afternoon? Depending on your job, depending on your industry, it may or may not be okay to block off half a day or even a full day for actual deep work. So I used to not take calls on Fridays, and I would actually have an auto reply that was up every Friday telling people that I'm not answering emails on Fridays. I'm recording courses, I'm doing deep work, and that's what I need to do my job. So depending on your job function, there might be an opportunity to talk to your boss, to your team, to say, hey, is everyone feeling like they're constantly interrupted? Should we have the second half of Tuesday be no meetings and just deep work? And re-examine, are the rules that we previously set, if there even were any, serving us in present time?
Yeah. And I think we have to figure out that balance for ourselves, the online, offline balance. And I think for everybody, it's totally different. I know for me, I do definitely need sometimes it's 10 minutes in between. You know, I do these mindful minutes in between my meetings in my day and just try to get back to the present moment, because before I know it, there's so many things coming at me and going on. And I love your calendar blocking. You know, we need spaciousness in our calendar. I sometimes do presentations to some groups, and you know, it's even for HR Florida conference a few years back on a topic of mindfulness, and people were saying, I don't even have breaks to go to the bathroom, you know. So that was, hopefully people are taking more control of their schedule and their tech, and giving them time so they can have that offline opportunity and have that balance and not get to extreme burnout that does happen.
Absolutely. And I think it really does come right back to that ownership component. And so when we realize that if we create complexity, then we have to untangle the complexity, that can also be a powerful aha moment. And this is something that I've talked to my mom about too. I'm like, hey, let's just make a plan, because if we have to keep in touch about the plan, that's so many different points of contact, right? When we could just have a plan and show up and place a phone call if we're really running super late. That relates to work too. So if you open 20 texts on a plane and are then having 20 new conversations with people before work starts, of course, those conversations are going to want to continue, and you're going to feel the kind of pull. You're going to want to have those dialogues. You're going to want to feel social. And so just bringing our attention to, are we creating complexity where there doesn't need to be complexity? Or if we want to have those conversations, can they be had at a different time so that we can actually not only create the conditions for focus and flow and productivity, but make sure that our online offline balance feels really good to us?
Oh, yeah. And I think, you know, everybody in the audience, I'd love to hear some workplace model of, you know, healthy digital boundaries, digital use. If you have any things that, you know, you really want to highlight that your company's doing or that you're doing with your team, love to hear it, because we all need to learn from each other. Especially, I think this is the hardest thing, the on and offline. We want to be offline and be in real life, but and build them stronger relationships and be present for everyone. But we sometimes don't do that. So if you have any other strategies that you're doing at work that you're bringing into the workplace, please let me know and chime in. And I think, you know, this is a quote I have on the next slide, which is really kind of, you know, I think something that we just got to keep in mind, that almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes, and including us, including you out here listening on this live stream. We can unplug and it'll be okay. The world's not going to end. I know there's sometimes that we think we need to do everything in that moment. A lot of my trainings I do, I'm always like, what's the harm? What's going to be the worst thing if you take that break? If you respond the next day? We don't always have to be on, but we have to figure out how we can be comfortable with not always being online.
Mm-hmm. And especially for the mornings. I mean, evenings are very important, but mornings, if we're waking up and we're conditioning other people to know that we're going to be answering emails before we're officially on the clock, then people are going to expect that of us. And so as we're talking about this kind of balance, I think it's also about what is kind of the true currency of our interactions and what we want. Is that time that we're enjoying? Is that figuring out in the noise of the internet how to find our kind of a digital sanctuary, and unfollowing accounts on Instagram that aren't bringing us joy, and only attending events that feel actionable and empowering? What does that kind of mean to you? and how does that show up in your life?
Yeah. And I think, one thing I train on is emotional intelligence. What role do you think that plays in managing digital overload that we're having? Because I do think we're probably not showing up the way we want to with the emotional intelligence we need to as a leader or as a peer or as, maybe even in our personal life as, a parent or, to our loved ones in the way we should.
Well, you're the expert on emotional intelligence,
Yeah.
so I may not you a few questions, but I think that emotional intelligence is especially important for managers, because when you have a manager who's not checking in, who's not seeing, who's not really helping to develop you or figure out if there's some block going on with your self-care or your health that might be impacting your productivity, that becomes a problem. But even for anyone who's just on a team, I think approaching things with care is really what it comes down to. And so, especially on a screen right now, we call this the digital filter. And Anna Lomanowska up in Canada is an incredible researcher who did a lot of kind of digging into, especially during COVID, how the digital filter impacted interactions and where breakdowns occurred. And one of the things that she talks about is how from here down, people don't know what's going on. So I could be anxiously tapping my foot and you wouldn't know. So what that means is that we have to pay attention. We have to look for more of those kind of subtle cues, and also name things more explicitly. So say, hey, I'm feeling tired, because you may or may not be able to tell that I'm a little bit hunched over and just flew back from Boston, or just name things for the clearest kind, because people don't know and people generally mean well, but the digital filter can distort things, and updating our practices. And so whether it's attending this event, whether it's doing some kind of deeper continuing education, I think digital wellness in a lot of cases is the missing metric, which is something that my co-founder Tyler Rice talks a lot about. And this missing metric is, oh yeah, the digital does change it. Our eye contact isn't really as flowing as it would be in person. So it takes longer, it takes more energy. We're getting Zoom fatigue, eye fatigue. We might want to make sure that we're positioned in front of things that aren't distracting. So I don't want to put like my cat or like a ceiling fan behind me, because I want everybody to be able to drop in. And so that ownership component. But to get back to emotional intelligence, I think it's about whether or not we've cultivated it, whether or not we inherently have it, making sure that we're showing up with care, making sure that we're bringing intention to our attention. And Melissa, can you share for the people who don't know, what is the kind of traditional definition of emotional intelligence, and can you learn it?
Oh, absolutely. It's all about the awareness of your emotions and the emotions of others, and really tapping into that self-management, and also the social awareness around your actions and your being. Are you showing up as your best self and cueing in? And the next slide has active listening. We really, I think I usually say this is kind of the key, the main key driver of emotional intelligence, or really listening to everyone. Like you talked about the cues, that's part of us listening to the conversation, their body language, what actually they're saying that they're not saying. We don't know that without having that emotional intelligence. And the good thing about emotional intelligence is that you can, unlike IQ, you can definitely increase that tremendously if you work on it. 80% of people's success is emotional intelligence. All the high performing leaders have emotional intelligence or need to work on it. And that's the one thing that I see that come up in my coaching conversations. It's about the communication that they're having, and maybe not showing emotional intelligence as much as they should. So,
I think that was so well said. And the kind of tangential term that we use to emotional intelligence with the digital filter and digital wellness is interpersonal synchrony. And so really looking at, can we effectively interpret and mimic, when appropriate, people's affect, people's behavior online, so that we do feel that we're tuned into things? Are we empathetic? Are we aware enough to notice what is happening, both for ourselves and for others? Because the other big category that we haven't really talked about is how it's showing up in our physical bodies, and how rarely people are taking breaks, and how frequently people are overriding all the cues and clues that tell them a bigger problem might be brewing if they don't take a little bit of time to unplug.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to talk a little bit about those symptoms that come up from the overuse of digital, since we kind of have that out there so everybody knows what they should be looking for,
Yeah. So overriding is really just that. It's when we push through a cue. So if I have some pain in my neck and I notice that before it turns into a headache, right? We really want to cultivate interoception and also proprioception, but in this case, mostly interoception, noticing what's going on in our bodies before it turns into something that's on fire. And so for people who are overriding, who are really entering the digital burnout end of the spectrum, cues and clues might be things like sedentary syndrome. So if you've been sitting for hours and hours and hours and your body is physically aching, if your eyes feel really dry and you're noticing that you have eye fatigue because we blink less when we're looking at a screen versus just talking to someone in person. Other things might be feeling a little bit emotionally reactive. So noticing that no matter what anybody says or who it is or what the contents are, you're just a little bit irritable. Feeling brain fog. These are just some examples of symptoms of digital burnout and what happens when we override.
Yeah. And we have to definitely try to notice them more and more, and know that there's reasons behind it, that we not just, it's kind of like you have a headache, you take aspirin or, an Advil, but there's a reason why you have a headache, possibly, that we need to, what's the cause? What's the root cause? Another thing with emotional intelligence that I think kind of goes through is the communication piece. And I know the digital communication is really important, because I think we go right to, using our digital devices instead of talking live. And when should we talk live? When should we use an email? When should we, text? When should we do our communication? And I think a lot of miscommunication is happening because of digital use.
Yeah.
Have you seen that too, Nina?
I have. And I think some of it is the reactivity because there's not inflection. So if I get an email, my default with people is to assume that they had good intentions until proven otherwise. But sometimes people just aren't aware of how they come off. And so those communication charters that we mentioned earlier, it's basically just an exercise, and there are all different templates out there where you pause with your team and say, hey, let's create norms if we don't have them. Maybe emails mean we need 24-hour turnaround time in that. If it's Slack or something similar to that, maybe you need to hear back within 2 hours. If it's a phone call, it means that something really is truly urgent. If it's a text, maybe we don't ever text. I don't know. And so every team is going to kind of have different norms. And sometimes, again, depending on the company or the industry, sometimes that company will need to designate someone to be on call. For example, customer support or service. Sometimes there is one person who needs to be available around the clock. But even just through doing that simple exercise, you're saying, hey, I need to pick up my kids at 4 p.m. I'll be offline for an hour, and then I'll be back for my last hour at 5 or 6. Letting people know so that if they don't hear from you, they don't feel blocked, but also empowering them. Because if someone knows that every Friday afternoon I am off the grid, chances are they're also going to organize their communication with me because they need something from me. So they're going to send me that email on Wednesday, not on Friday. So it really helps us to honor each other's time and be organized and take ownership of what is in our control.
Yeah. And I think with 5 generations in the workplace too, everybody wants to communicate in different ways and has different boundaries, and we need to make sure we're communicating about them so we all work together and communicate it together as effectively as possible. And I think for when we started talking about emotional intelligence, what I do bring home a lot in my trainings is the self-care component. If you're not taking care of yourself, you're not going to show up as your best self. So we definitely have to have digital self-care as well too. It comes into play. So when we're feeling burnout from that, we need to, get into our self-care. And I think, one thing I haven't done as much of, but I probably should, but maybe doing a digital detox. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you know and what you've seen out there that maybe the community out there is doing for detoxing from their digital devices?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think digital detoxes are most enjoyable for people when they are retreats that you attend, because then it's something that you look forward to. If you try to do a digital detox at home, it's possible, but it's very challenging because you're in your house, you're doing your chores, you realize, oh, I have to text the contractor, this piece of tile is cracked. There are just things that inevitably come up. And so doing a digital detox outside of your normative environment can actually result in the exhale, in the pause, in the recharging that you're craving. If you can do it in a place with no cell service, even better, probably for you, but it is very possible to do it at a beautiful hotel that you love or something like that, so long as you let people know that you are going to be offline ahead of time so that you're not wondering, oh, I didn't tell grandma and she's going to call me 5 times and wonder if I'm alive. And so make sure that you set it up properly for yourself. I do want to note on the mental health side of things that digital detoxes are not recommended kind of as a blanket approach for everyone. There are certain populations who are going to be more sensitive. So if we're looking at a child with autism who is using their iPad for activity, and that's really helpful for them, or someone who's really connecting with others and their friends are going through a hard time, doing a digital detox can be very jarring. So it's definitely not for everyone. But if you're craving it, it means that you already need it and you already have that clarity. So carving out time on your calendar, again, doesn't have to be a whole weekend, even half of Saturday afternoon. Just notice what it's like to go out with your family and have everyone leave their tech at home. And maybe that means you have to print out directions on MapQuest. Remember MapQuest?
Yeah.
Don't have the GPS on your phone, but it will be okay. And you're going to learn and you're going to form memories together. And the research actually shows, Melissa, that if you're taking a picture of something on your phone, you are less likely to remember that moment. So isn't that interesting?
Oh, I love taking pictures. My boyfriend would love that you said that. I think hopefully he's listening so you can later about that, because I do love taking pictures in the moments too, which I know you lose, right? And I think even with cameras or taking pictures or anything you're using with tech that bring you a lot of happiness, you have to know when, it's not bringing you happiness and check in with yourself. Are you still being energized by that tech, or is it draining you? And I know a lot of people journal as well too on the tech effects. Do you have any, do you journal about it, or do you have any go-to kind of, prompts for your reflection in these areas?
Yes, I love journaling, and I can definitely give you journaling prompts. But something that I do personally journaling is I love the pen to paper, and so every day I have a notebook and I write down 3 categories, and those categories are progress, not to do, because we're reframing it, progress, self-care, and positive affirmations. And either in the evening, the night prior, or first thing, I write down what that day looks like, because every day is different. And I think especially with working from home or hybrid for a lot of folks, flexible routine is there. And so by flexible routine, I mean acknowledging that every day is different. So your pipe might burst, your child might be sick. You can have the best laid plans, but things come up. And so my invitation to you all, even right now, is to just write down what are some short, medium, and long breaks. So like 10-minute, 20-minute, hour breaks that you can take. And just by virtue of creating that list, you're going to reduce behavioral friction and increase the likelihood of actually taking that break. So write them down, tape it up to the wall, and then the next time you have a break for 10 minutes, whether or not it was planned, you can look at that list and say, oh, I could answer 10 more emails, or I could go and walk around the block, which takes exactly 10 minutes. Perfect. But my my only way that I've found to really like embed it into my emotional and physical body is to do that journaling exercise that I mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
And what I really love about that one is it is framed as progress list, and anything that doesn't make it on that list and doesn't get crossed off gets moved to the next day, but also the affirmations. And so I link my progress to my affirmations. And so if I said to myself under the progress category, send Melissa slides by 8 a.m., my affirmation might be, I easily create slides and enjoy every second of it. Or you can get playful with it, but connect the two together to tell your body that you're doing it, to tell your body that it's already going well, and not feel like there's this pile of things. There's a quote that one of my old employers had in his email, and it was, your inbox is a to-do list created by others. And that was always so powerful for me and a little bit disturbing, because in a lot of ways, our inbox is a to-do list created by others. And so acknowledging that means making sure that you have perhaps an hour or even more carved out every day to execute the tasks that inevitably come up that are not already on your radar, but also letting this person know, hey, I can have that too on Friday, and deciding for yourself what is and isn't truly urgent.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we have to lead by example with wellness, right? And sometimes we can check in and figure out what our people really need. You know, I've had one leader that did a Zoom free day because they were on Zoom all the time, and it felt like it was consuming them, and it wasn't really being productive. Now, when you got on Zoom, they were not paying attention. They weren't being present. So we have to encourage digital wellness at work in all different ways. You know, I know there's sometimes, like you said, on Friday, you don't answer emails. I know some companies have meeting-free days, or they only want meetings in person now for certain things because then you're not using tech. I think digital wellness is kind of like one of the biggest thing we need to do to make sure we're, making our culture the way it needs to be and helping with that burnout.
Absolutely.
And I know you guys do a lot with digital wellness at work. Do you want to start highlighting a little bit of that and how you're fostering a digital wellness culture in a lot of companies that you interact with?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is also an ebook that I can share a link to that has a lot of great tips, but we covered some of them, the communication charters, the being mindful as leaders of, are you taking a break? Are you telling people that you're taking a break? Because it might actually behoove you to tell people that you're taking a break and encourage them to break at the same time as you. And so these are things that sometimes we feel like we have to hide, when in reality, we might create more organizational flow if everyone felt that they could be eating lunch and offline for that 1 hour, and then we all come back together. So there are some things like that. Looking at check-ins, so making sure that you have check-ins with all of the people on your team to actually give them the time and space, because if we only have 2 minutes, I'm not going to open up to you about how my dog just passed away or anything like that. You're not really going to get to the heart of what's going on in 2 minutes. So creating the conditions for people to feel comfortable sharing. And I think also a lot of folks have moved out of traditional offices. And so looking at, how are those budgets being reallocated? Are there employee wellness events? Are there things we can do to actually make this more fun? Can you give everyone a $10 coffee card and everybody orders coffee delivery and sips their coffee on a call together? What are the little things that make a really big impact and also make people feel like they want to be a part of the company, of the culture? I'm seeing a big increase in offsites. So this also includes employees interviewing employers and saying, hey, do you have any times when everyone connects in person? So not really a retreat for employees, but a time to do deep work in person on big projects. So all of these little things, I think, make people want to be a part of a really empowered and organized digital culture.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you could bring the team together to figure out the right way to bring your digital wellness in the organization or to everybody together. I know you can do a team challenge on digital wellness. Everybody, and like you said, everybody doing it together. I didn't even know we were kind of doing digital wellness. With my old team, we would always, go all together to get a smoothie and walk like across the street and get away together and just chat. And it wasn't even about work. We kind of had them connection times. And I think we're probably doing some of the stuff that's going to help us be digitally well, but we're not framing it in that way.
Yes. Or we don't know the exact words, like email apnea, like digital resilience and flourishing. And so I think that this session today has been a beautiful kind of intro to the foundations of this topic. And hopefully people feel empowered to try at least a few of the things that we talked about. But just by showing up today, everyone is already becoming kind of that change agent towards this healthier online and offline culture.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, I know we're running at time. This was, before we knew it, we got to a full hour. I do have in a couple slides from here, that some of the offerings that you guys have. You do a digital wellness hub, you have education resources, you have a survey that they can do as well that you mentioned earlier about, being digitally well. Usually I end things on a quote because I love quotes. So before I say thank you to you, Nina, I just wanted to put one of my favorite quotes, which is on the next slide. And I kind of created it from a lot of things, but digital wellness isn't about unplugging from tech. It's about plugging back into what matters most in an intentional way. I think we need it. AI has come and we use it every day, and we're not saying goodbye to tech. We're saying use it intentionally, use it when it matters most. So
I love this quote. Thank you for sharing. And thank you for organizing, Melissa and Georgette. Thank you all.
Thank you so much. And, I do some trainings for HR Florida on wellness, infusing mindful moments. And I can do more with digital wellness as well, too, kind of leading with digital intentions. So anybody out there from HR Florida wants me to come to their chapter, please reach out. I'd love to talk about these topics. So, and I'll hand it over to you, Georgette. Thank you so much, Nina. Thank you, Georgette, for, organizing and helping me put this together. And Nina, there were so many insights and nuggets that I took away and I wrote down, and hopefully everyone else took them too.
Well, thank you so much. And the comments agree that this was a really great session on digital wellness. And thank you, Melissa. Thank you, Nina, for spending time. It was really great meeting you as well. A couple things from the HR Florida team before we wrap up here. So if you missed our newswire that was sent out earlier this week, I'm dropping in the comments here that there is a lot of educational resources available through the partnership that we have with Academy to Innovate HR, so AIHR, the other AI for HR. And I just dropped that link in the comments so that you can check it out, because there is a 20% discount for some courses and certification programs that they have available. And as a reminder, we will be announcing the applications for Emerging Professionals Conference Scholarship Giveaway. That's a long title. Very, very soon, either by the end of today or tomorrow. So make sure that you're following us on socials for that. As a reminder, emerging professionals are considered professionals who are under 3 years of experience within the field. So that can be a student, or that could be somebody who's maybe changing careers altogether, but they have 3 years or less of experience within HR. And there's much, much more to keep in mind. There's also the nominations for HR Professionals of the Year, which we are still accepting. So this is a long-winded reminder to say, make sure that you're following us on socials, checking your emails, because we have a lot of really great content and more sessions like this that are coming your way in the future. So thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.